Act. This is a case of the exception that followed the rule. A loophole in our trade system has been exploited overseas, particularly by China and other sellers. Section 321 of the Tariff Act of 1930 is the de minimis provision that we're talking about today. It allows the expedited entry of packages that are valued at $800 or less into the U.S. without customs duties or significant inspection. This provision was originally designed to save money by avoiding the costs associated with inspecting low-value packages. However, over the years, it has evolved into a massive problem. What was once a small number of parcels has turned into a tsunami of goods flooding our shores. These goods are often unregulated, unsafe, and sometimes even illegal. They bypass import duties, sales taxes, and regulations. Meanwhile, American businesses follow the rules, they pay taxes, and they support U.S. jobs. This has put U.S. manufacturers and retailers at a very severe disadvantage. Over the past few decades, online marketplaces have exploded, providing overseas sellers with direct access to our economy. Yet these sellers don't pay import duties, they don't pay sales or excise taxes, they don't support U.S. jobs, and they don't pay rent to storefronts. Instead, they siphon off sales, jobs, and revenue while filling our markets with low-quality consumer goods that add nothing to our economy. Meanwhile, U.S.-based businesses are paying tariffs on imports, collecting sales taxes, complying with strict state and federal regulations, and supporting American jobs. This imbalance has led to greater inequality and economic instability. It also opens the door to duty evasion, gamesmanship, and lawlessness, which you'll hear a little bit more about today. With over 4 million packages arriving on our shores every day, meaningful enforcement of laws is nearly impossible. The de minimis provision has become a tool for illicit trade, especially from China. Whether it's fentanyl and its precursors, ghost guns, illegal silencers, cheap knockoffs, or unsafe toys made with lead, China remains the source of many harmful products that are entering our market. But the problem isn't just about China, it's about the loophole itself. We cannot keep responding with half measures or simply playing whack-a-mole with specific countries. The root cause is the loophole in the system. Other countries are already taking action to address this problem. The European Union, for example, is reforming its system, and countries like Brazil, Vietnam, and South Africa are following suit. The de minimis loophole has put our own retailers and manufacturers at a huge competitive disadvantage. So it's time for Congress to put an end to this. The de minimis provision was never meant to be what it is today. It was created to save time and money when assessing low-value imports. But now the cost to us is enormous. We feel it is in the billions of dollars in lost revenue, in the jobs shipped overseas, in stolen intellectual property, and tragically in the lives of young people and loved ones who we have lost to fentanyl. If we are being truly intellectually honest and true to our laws, there should be no de minimis. If goods are coming into the United States, they should meet our health and safety standards. They should pay import duties. And if they are illegal or illicit, customs should have the tools and the authority to find those packages, to stop them, and to hold the perpetrators accountable. This bill is a necessary first step, but there is more that can be done. It's time to close the de minimis loophole and protect American workers, businesses, and consumers. Again, I want to thank you for being here today. I would now like to invite Anderson Warlick, the chairman and CEO of Parkdale Mills. He is going to discuss how closing the de minimis loophole will support American manufacturing. Anderson, the microphone is yours.
Congresswoman Sanchez, thank you for the opportunity to speak today in support of this legislation that is important to our nation, to the U.S. textile industry, to me personally, and to the men and women who work for Parkdale Mills. My name is Anderson Warlick, and I am the chairman and CEO of Parkdale Mills, which is headquartered in Gastonia, North Carolina. We're right outside Charlotte, North Carolina. We're one of the world's leading manufacturers of spun yarns with significant operations here in the United States and also the Western Hemisphere. I am extremely grateful for Congresswoman Sanchez's leadership on this issue and for all of you here today in support of this bill. I think the Congresswoman gave probably one of the best speeches I've heard on the problems with de minimis. De minimis is severely impacting my company, U.S. textile and apparel manufacturers, brands and retailers, and our Western Hemisphere trading partners. I cannot emphasize enough the urgency to close the de minimis loophole. The American textile industry has lost 27 manufacturing plants in the last 20 months. The entire industry is facing a severe economic decline, and nearly every textile facility in our country is now running at significantly reduced run rates, and some lines are completely idle. We are, without a doubt, the industry that's most affected by de minimis. Textile and apparel imports make up at least 50% of the boxes and goods that come in daily into this country. And they're coming in duty-free, undercutting domestic textile and apparel manufacturers, and they facilitate the delivery of illegal and illicit products to our doorsteps. Our workers and companies make life-saving equipment for our U.S. warfighters, and we make critical PPE in times of crisis, particularly during the COVID crisis. Our industry provides much needed jobs in rural areas of the country, and it's a springboard for workers to work their way out of poverty into higher paying jobs, and those jobs last for generations. Those are being destroyed by de minimis. De minimis undermines our attempts to onshore or even reshore production back into this hemisphere to help these supply chains grow. De minimis is also, as the Congresswoman highlighted, it's costing the U.S. Treasury billions of dollars every year in uncollected duties and taxes. This legislation, the Closing the De Minimis Loophole Act, is the most far-reaching bill introduced to date to put an end to de minimis. I urge the members of Congress on both sides of the aisle to sign on to this legislation immediately so we can close the de minimis loophole now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would now like to welcome Andy Edmondson from the National Association of Police Organizations. She will talk about how closing the de minimis loophole will help officers on the front lines of the fentanyl crisis.
Thank you, Congresswoman Sanchez, for leading the effort to close the de minimis loophole and for introducing this important legislation. I'm here on behalf of the National Association of Police Organizations, which represents over 250,000 state and local law enforcement officers across the country. We view closing this trade loophole as a vital part of any national strategy to stop the spread of fentanyl, which is devastating our communities. Fentanyl is now the drug most associated with overdose deaths. This deadly poison is being mixed with other illicit drugs, hidden in counterfeit drugs, and being peddled at alarmingly high rates to our nation's youth. 5 out of 10 counterfeit drugs being seized by law enforcement in 2024 were laced with a deadly dose of fentanyl. The amount of fentanyl the DEA seized in 2024, nearly 8,000 pounds, represents over 367 million deaths. As law enforcement officers, our members are on the front lines, and they see firsthand the destruction fentanyl brings to our communities. Our officers work hard to keep it and other dangerous drugs off our streets and out of our neighborhoods, but they are fighting a losing fight if Chinese drug smugglers can continue to circumvent our trade laws and ship hundreds of thousands of packages of fentanyl directly into our country. The de minimis loophole is severely exacerbating the opioid crisis and contributing to deaths in our country by allowing fentanyl, other illicit opioids, and related contraband into our country duty-free and largely uninspected. Drug traffickers are increasingly using the de minimis loophole to traffic illicit narcotics. In January 2023, federal agents raided the home of a Tucson, Arizona man who had delivered over 15,000 pounds of fentanyl precursor chemicals to a Mexican cartel over a 2-year period. That is enough fentanyl-related substances to produce 5.3 billion pills, enough to kill every person in the United States several times over. The chemicals had traveled through the international mail system as de minimis packages from China to Los Angeles, then shipped to Tucson and driven the last miles to Mexico. In July 2024, DEA and Homeland Security investigations indicted a Chinese national and his associates for shipping over 4,400 pounds of fentanyl precursor chemicals from China into the United States in approximately 100 separate shipments. Again, these traffickers were able to avoid law enforcement interdiction by shipping them as de minimis packages and by intermixing the boxes containing these precursor chemicals with other de minimis items. Once the packages were in the United States, they were then shipped to Mexico to then be manufactured into fentanyl. While these traffickers were brought to justice by joint law enforcement operations, many, many more escaped justice due to the de minimis loophole. NAPO strongly believes that closing this trade loophole will help stop the flow of illicit narcotics coming across our borders and will safeguard the lives of our children, our family, and our friends. So we are calling on Congress to act quickly and to pass the closing the de minimis loophole today. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you so much. We had another speaker, Andrea Thomas from Facing Fentanyl, who was supposed to join us today for the press conference, but her flight was unfortunately delayed. Andrea is the founder of Facing Fentanyl, an organization that she started after losing her daughter Ashley to fentanyl overdose. She asked me if I could read her statement, and so I'm going to do that now. Facing Fentanyl strongly supports Congresswoman Sanchez's Closing the De Minimis Loophole Act. This critical piece of legislation takes a significant step forward towards closing the dangerous loophole that has allowed deadly fentanyl and other illicit substances to enter the United States undetected, putting our communities and our families at grave risk. The de minimis loophole has enabled small packages from countries, particularly China, to bypass proper inspection, facilitating the flow of synthetic opioids like fentanyl into our neighborhoods. These deadly substances have claimed the lives of thousands of individuals, especially young people, and have devastated countless families across the country. By terminating de minimis treatment for packages from China immediately and for all other countries as well, this bill will take an important stride in stopping fentanyl from entering our borders undetected and unregulated. The bill's provisions also ensure consistency between postal shipments and other shipments, which is critical to closing gaps that have been exploited by drug traffickers. As an organization representing over 200 fentanyl awareness groups and thousands of families who have lost loved ones to fentanyl poisoning, Facing Fentanyl knows firsthand the devastating impact of this epidemic. This bill is a necessary and urgent measure to protect future generations from the same tragic fate. We thank Congresswoman Sanchez for her leadership and urge Congress to act quickly to pass this bill and bring an end to the flow of fentanyl into our communities. Facing Fentanyl stands in full support of the Closing the De Minimis Loophole Act and calls on lawmakers and our president to make it a priority. Again, we really appreciate her remarks, although she could not be here in person. And now it's my pleasure to welcome Roy Hausman from United Steelworkers to discuss how closing the loophole will benefit American workers. Roy?
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roy Hausman. I'm the Legislative Director for United Steelworkers. And we represent about 850,000 members and retirees in a number of industries, ranging as large as our major steel companies to smaller companies like American Roots, which makes clothing products and other items up in Maine. So those workers there face the competition of an unregulated de minimis. And that's why the steelworkers are very supportive of Representative Linda Sanchez's closing the de minimis loophole act, because it starts with our small employers, where we represent workers, right? That's a community of mostly migrant workers who have been diligently producing products in Maine and creating an ecosystem, right? And that ecosystem shouldn't have to unfairly compete against an $800 de minimis where people are able to ship a product in and avoid all customs duties and the relative protections that have been discussed so far. So when workers want to make that decision of choosing to buy an American-made good or choosing to buy something online, they need that opportunity. I think that that's something that we continue to think about all the time from a steelworker's perspective. And we talk about fentanyl, we talk about these issues. Those are real issues that our membership deal with day in, day out. Our staff and others, the amount of times that we have to deal with that grievance, that termination, that issue over someone's choices and unfortunate circumstances because there's this easy access to fentanyl and other drugs. And this ability for us to close the de minimis loophole and reduce this sort of packages. And then we have to ask ourselves what the importance of these issues related to the broader issues that when we trade. The idea that right now, where many of these packages come from the People's Republic of China, where you have 7 million people in Hong Kong who've lost their democratic rights, forced labor in the Uyghur region, all of these elements combine together to say, why are we allowing these packages to come in unregulated and at a level that is just easy to pass through and causes too much chaos and frustration for workers and for communities and businesses. So for USW, we see this bill as the right direction and an ability for us to make sure that when we close the de minimis loophole, we're improving domestic workers' opportunity, we're improving small businesses, large businesses, and the communities around us. So we again want to thank Linda Sanchez for her work on this, and we will look forward to working with members of Congress and pushing this legislation forward.
Thank you. Okay, and finally, I would like to welcome Patrick Cunane from Stoker Strategies, who has seen firsthand how detrimental de minimis has been for American businesses as well.
Thank you, Congresswoman. It's really an honor to be here, and Congresswoman Sanchez, thank you so much for this bill. Like so many others here, I've been fighting for many years to end this crazy loophole. In 2018, I testified before the USTR, and I said that the current de minimis $800 threshold was hurting businesses like mine, causing death by 1,000 cuts. Some of the examples in our industry of the damage that de minimis does is bicycle helmets for children are sold that don't pass the tests, and there's no recourse, no ability to have a recall on those products. Another product problem that you're aware of is battery fires, lithium-ion batteries that are part of bicycles that are sold into the country, or replacement batteries come in through de minimis, catch fires, and kill people. Today, because of the thousands of people's of effort and Congresswoman Sanchez's bill, we have the chance to close de minimis once and for all. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the speaking portion of our press conference. We are available to answer questions if there are questions. We have short question and answer period. Yes, and then yes. Yeah, so what we have seen is a lack of real strategic understanding of trade and trade issues by this administration, because they announce things and then realize that they're unworkable and they walk them back. So my bill would have a transition period where we would work with Customs and Border Patrol and the Postal Service to make sure we have the systems in place to handle the volume of packages that come in, so that they don't come into our economy unregulated and without paying duties on those goods. Yes.
My question is for the CEO of Mills and also for Roy on the
Step up.
haphazard policies and the need to walk them back. I wonder if you export yarn or fabric to Mexico, and I wonder what you're hearing for your workers in terms of the tariffs in Canada and Mexico are like workers going to be idle because of what this is going to do to the integrated
Go first. Okay.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah. No, good question. I mean, look, for us, focusing on the de minimis, we see this as the right policy to like better improving the ecosystem for workers. And then the union has taken a very firm position that we see the tariffs on Canada as unnecessary. As you've highlighted in the question, this integration between the back and forth of auto parts and auto factories. For the union, we've had over a 50-year relationship of binational unionism. A number of other unions have also have this binational relationship, the unique security relationship between Canada and the United States. And so ultimately for us, we see this as not the right direction. President McCall has said so. I think for us, we do have longer-term strategic issues with Mexico, but that is something we believe should be addressed in USMCA renegotiations. The 25% tariff without really thinking about how we properly address the labor and environmental issues in Mexico isn't just the only issue. Fentanyl isn't the only issue, and immigration isn't the only issue for American workers, and that includes these items like improving working conditions in Mexico so that we're not unfairly competing and not allowing these multinational corporations to pollute in countries while at the expense of American workers. And so, I mean, that's kind of where we're at least with those items. But, I mean, we see this as all part of a larger ecosystem related to trade, and this de minimis is, it may sound small, but it's really big, All right.
Thank you. That's a great question, and we do export to Mexico. We also, but the textile industry has a unique supply chain. If you go back to when NAFTA was originated in 1994, we did something in our industry that we adopted, and it was called the yarn forward rule. And that yarn forward rule meant that everything, and whether it was a garment or a textile product, had to be made in either Canada, the United States, or Mexico. And that yarn forward rule has worked very, very well, in this supply chain, going back and forth. The tariffs will interrupt the yarn forward rule.
How long would they be in place before you would have to start furloughing? And how many people could it affect?
That could be weeks.
Within weeks, you think?
Yeah, but I do think that the way the textile industry operates, it could be a role model for other industries, because I don't know that some of the autos and other industries there have the same type of component forward issue. 100% of what we do has to be made in those countries. So if I'm the administration, I look at that and say, this is something that works. This is something that's working, that's not beating the system by bringing in counterfeit parts or other parts from China or other countries. So, thank you.
Probably last question. Yes. No. No. Yeah, so let me try to take your first question first. Can you repeat that? Taking the... Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, it just depends on if he's having a good day or a bad day, because there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to what he announces and then pulls back. There's just, again, not a cohesive strategy. And, you know, people look at him and think that, you know, his style is just aggressive and that's just him. But, I mean, you're looking at retaliatory tariffs on the part of Canada and Mexico that we may be looking at soon, and China certainly. The president has been talking about tariffs for the European Union. I mean, you can't get into a trade war